At 3:42 p.m. on the 31st of March 2023, the National Weather Service in Little Rock, Arkansas, issued a tornado warning for western Pulaski County. The warning was based on a storm that had been rapidly intensifying over the Ouachita Mountains earlier that afternoon. Meteorologists had been tracking a line of severe thunderstorms that formed along a dry line, a boundary between dry air to the west and moist Gulf air to the east. Conditions were volatile. The atmosphere was unstable, wind shear was strong, and the storm that eventually reached Little Rock was showing a classic rotation signature on radar. The warning urged immediate action, seek shelter now. Everything seemed routine for a late March day in Tornado Alley. Only a few minutes later, something was off. At 3:44 p.m., a spotter near the town of Paron, about 25 miles west of Little Rock, reported a funnel cloud. The National Weather Service updated the warning, noting that a tornado was likely. At 3:46 p.m., the same spotter confirmed a tornado on the ground. It was large and moving fast. The storm's rotation tightened. Radar indicated a debris ball, a signature that means the tornado is tearing through structures and picking up material. At 3:48 p.m., the tornado crossed into the city limits of Little Rock. It was now a wedge tornado with a width estimated at over 400 yards. The National Weather Service upgraded the warning to a tornado emergency, the highest level, urging anyone in the path to take cover immediately. There was no time to wait. The tornado was moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. At 3:49 p.m., the tornado entered a neighborhood near Chenal Parkway, one of the wealthier sections of West Little Rock. Homes were struck, trees were snapped, vehicles were tossed. Witnesses described the sound as a freight train, then a roar. Within 90 seconds, the tornado had crossed Interstate 430, a major highway encircling the city. Traffic was heavy. The tornado hit several cars and trucks, sending them spinning. Emergency dispatchers began receiving calls from people trapped in their vehicles. The tornado continued its northeast path, moving into more densely populated areas. At 3:52 p.m., it struck a shopping center on South Bowman Road, destroying a strip mall and damaging a large retail store. The debris field expanded. Pieces of roof, siding, and insulation were carried over a mile. At 3:54 p.m., the tornado crossed over the Arkansas River, still at EF3 strength. It hit the city's River Mountain area, damaging several industrial buildings. At 3:56 p.m., it struck the intersection of Interstate 30 and 65th Street near the Little Rock National Cemetery. Multiple semi-trucks were overturned. The tornado then moved into the city's east side, a more working-class area. At 3:58 p.m., it passed through a mobile home park. The structures there offered little protection. Many homes were completely destroyed. At 4:01 p.m., the tornado began to weaken. It lifted briefly, then touched down again for a few seconds. Finally, at 4:04 p.m., it dissipated near the town of Sherwood, about 10 miles northeast of downtown Little Rock. The entire path was 23 miles long. The tornado had been on the ground for 18 minutes. What happened? The tornado of March 31, 2023 was not the strongest tornado to hit Arkansas in recent years. It was rated EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale with maximum estimated wind speeds of 165 miles per hour, but it struck a heavily populated area during the afternoon rush hour. The results were devastating. 4 people were killed. At least 32 others were injured. Hundreds of homes and businesses were damaged or destroyed. The economic loss was estimated at over $100 million, but the numbers alone do not tell the full story. The tornado's path cut through the heart of one of the state's largest cities, exposing the fragility of even a well-prepared community when a fast-moving tornado arrives without much lead time. The meteorological setup that day had been well anticipated. The National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center had placed much of central Arkansas under a slight risk for severe thunderstorms 2 days earlier. By the morning of March 31st, the risk had been upgraded to an enhanced risk, and by early afternoon, a moderate risk. Forecasters noted the potential for tornadoes, but the specific storm that hit Little Rock developed quickly. The dry line pushed east rapidly, destabilizing the air ahead of it. A supercell thunderstorm formed near the Arkansas-Oklahoma border around noon. It moved east across the Ozarks, dropping a weak tornado in Pope County around 2:15 p.m. That storm weakened, but another storm formed behind it. This second storm, the one that would hit Little Rock, developed near Mount Ida around 2:30 p.m. It intensified quickly as it moved into a pocket of stronger wind shear. Meteorologists at the Little Rock National Weather Service office were watching the radar closely. At 3:20 p.m., they noted a developing mesocyclone, a rotating updraft. They issued a severe thunderstorm warning first, then upgraded to a tornado warning at 3:42 p.m. That warning gave residents of western Little Rock roughly 10 minutes of advance notice. For many, that was enough. For others, especially those in the path of the tornado's rapid advance, it was barely enough time to reach a safe place. The tornado touched down just 4 minutes after the warning was issued. By the time the tornado emergency was declared at 3:48 p.m., the tornado was already entering the city. Who was involved? The victims were diverse. The first fatality was a 60-year-old woman in a home near Chenal Parkway. She was alone when the tornado struck. Her house collapsed on top of her. The second victim was a 35-year-old man driving a pickup truck on Interstate 30. He was thrown from his vehicle when the tornado lifted it and rolled it onto its side. The third victim was a 72-year-old man in a mobile home on the east side. Mobile homes are extremely vulnerable to tornadoes, even those of moderate intensity. The fourth victim was a 48-year-old mother of two who lived in a brick house near 65th Street. She was in her bathroom, huddled with her children, when a large tree fell through the roof, killing her instantly. Her children survived. Those who were injured included people caught in cars, people in apartments, and people who tried to outrun the tornado. Many were lucky, many were not. Emergency responders faced a chaotic scene. The tornado had damaged or blocked multiple roads. Power lines were down. Gas leaks were reported. The city's 911 system was overwhelmed. Firefighters and police officers began searching collapsed buildings within minutes. Search and rescue teams from neighboring counties were called in. By nightfall, the initial search was complete, but the damage assessment took days. The American Red Cross opened shelters. The National Guard was deployed to help with security and cleanup. The community responded quickly. Neighbors helped neighbors. Volunteers brought food and water. But for those who lost everything, the immediate aftermath was a blur of shock and uncertainty. What investigators found? Within hours of the tornado, teams from the National Weather Service began surveying the damage. They used ground surveys, drone footage, and satellite imagery to map the path. They identified areas of EF3 damage. Well-built homes torn apart, large trees uprooted, cars thrown distances of over 100 yards. The most intense damage was in the Chenal Parkway area, where homes had been flattened, and in the mobile home park, where almost nothing was left standing. The tornado's width fluctuated, reaching a maximum of about 500 yards. The path was continuous, with only a brief lift near the end. The tornado's forward speed averaged around 40 miles per hour, which contributed to its ability to cause damage across a wide area in a short time. Investigators also studied the warning system. The National Weather Service had issued the tornado warning with an average lead time of 12 minutes for the entire path. That was within their standard guidelines, but lead time varies depending on location. Some areas had less than 10 minutes. The tornado emergency issued at 3:48 p.m. gave downtown areas about 6 minutes. For a tornado moving at this speed, that is tight. The question that emerged was whether the warning could have been issued earlier. Meteorologists at the Little Rock office noted that the rotation signature was subtle at first, and that storms in that environment can spin up quickly. They followed their protocols. Still, some residents in the path reported that they did not receive the warning at all. Some had cell phones on silent. Others relied on outdoor sirens, but sirens are designed for people who are outside, not those inside buildings. In a city, sirens can be muffled by walls and noise. What systems failed? There were no major system failures in a technical sense. The radar worked, the warning was issued, the communication channels functioned, but the system relies on people receiving and acting on warnings. That is where gaps emerged. Some residents did not have a weather radio, some did not have a smartphone, some had smartphones but turned off notifications. The warning reached many but not all. Another issue was the timing. The tornado hit during the afternoon rush hour when thousands of people were on the roads. Many were not in a safe place. They were commuting home, picking up children from school, or running errands. The infrastructure for highway messaging was limited. In the mobile home park, many residents had no basement or storm shelter. The community had been aware of the risk, but building a safe room is expensive. The system did not fail in a dramatic way, but it failed in the way that all systems eventually fail. It could not protect everyone. The human factor also played a role. Some residents reported that they did not believe the tornado would actually hit them. They had lived in Little Rock for years and had never seen a tornado in the city. There is a psychological distance that comes with infrequent events. People become desensitized to warnings. Others chose to stay and watch the storm rather than take shelter. One survivor said she looked out her window and saw the sky turn green, but she thought it would be fine. She was wrong. The tornado tore off her roof. Why does this event still matter? The Little Rock tornado of 2023 is a case study in how an EF3 tornado, not a catastrophic EF5, can still cause significant loss of life and property when it strikes a densely populated area during a vulnerable time of day. It reminds us that tornadoes do not have to be record-breaking to be deadly. The event was not a surprise meteorologically, but it was a surprise socially. It demonstrated that even with excellent forecasting, warning dissemination, and response, some people will still be caught off guard. The aftermath prompted discussions about improving highway messaging, funding for storm shelters in mobile home parks, and the need for more resilience in urban planning. It also raised questions about the accuracy of tornado warnings when storms form quickly. A few extra minutes of lead time could have made a difference. Could the models have predicted the exact location earlier? That remains an area of active research. The tornado also highlighted the importance of community preparedness. In the days after the storm, stories emerged of families who had rehearsed tornado drills. Some survived because they knew exactly where to go. Others who did not have a plan survived by luck. The difference between life and death was often a matter of seconds or a few feet. The event became a call to action. Local governments began applying for grants to build public shelters. Schools reviewed their safety procedures, but change is slow and the memory of the storm fades over time. The question is whether the lessons will be remembered when the next tornado comes. The Little Rock tornado was not unique in its destruction. Similar storms have hit other cities, but it was a reminder that tornadoes are a part of life in the American South. They are not going away, and as cities expand and climate patterns shift, the risk may only increase. The event matters because it is recent, it is relatable, and it holds lessons that apply far beyond Arkansas. It is a story about the power of nature, the limits of human preparation, and the thin margin that separates a close call from a tragedy. In the hours after the tornado, search and rescue operations continued through the night. At 7:15 p.m. on March 31st, the Little Rock Fire Department announced that all known survivors had been accounted for. But the work was far from over. The city faced a new challenge: how to shelter hundreds of displaced residents while assessing structural damage and preventing looting. The National Guard set up checkpoints. Utility crews from across the state arrived to restore power. By midnight, over 30,000 customers were still without electricity. Some neighborhoods would remain dark for days. The morning after the storm, the sky was clear and blue, a cruel contrast to the violence that had passed. Residents emerged from basements, bathtubs, and interior closets to find their streets unrecognizable. Trees lay across cars. Roofs had been peeled away like tin lids. The smell of natural gas hung in the air. Emergency alerts continued to warn of downed power lines and debris. In the hardest-hit area, Chenal Parkway, the scene looked less like a suburban street and more like a war zone. Homes that had stood for decades were reduced to piles of splintered wood and drywall. One survivor, a 56-year-old woman named Patricia, described hiding in her hallway closet with her cat as the tornado passed overhead. She heard a sound like a freight train, then the walls started to shake. The house groaned. Then the roof was gone. When she opened the closet door, she saw sky where her living room ceiling used to be. She walked outside and saw her neighbor's house flattened. Her neighbor, the 68-year-old woman who lived alone, was found under the debris hours later. She did not survive. Patricia's story was one of hundreds. The National Weather Service survey teams fanned out across the damage path at dawn on April 1st. They measured wind speed indicators, snapped power poles, twisted metal, and the way debris had been scattered. They classified the tornado as an EF3 with maximum winds estimated at 165 miles per hour. The path length was 12.6 miles. The average width was 400 yards, though at its peak near the intersection of Chenal Parkway and Caney's Road, the damaged swath reached 600 yards. The tornado had touched down at 3:41 p.m. and lifted at 4:03 p.m., staying on the ground for 22 minutes. But there was a puzzle. Despite the intensity, the death toll remained at 4. Why? Investigators later noted several factors. The tornado hit during a weekday afternoon when many people were at work or commuting. But office buildings and schools often have interior rooms or basements. The death toll might have been much higher if the tornado had struck at night when people are asleep in vulnerable structures. Also, the rotation was not as violent as it could have been. The worst damage was confined to a narrow band. Many homes just a block away from the center line escaped with only minor damage. Timing and luck played a role. Still, the 4 deaths were devastating to the families and the community. The 68-year-old woman in the Chenal Parkway house was a retired schoolteacher named Margaret. She had lived in that home since 1985. Her son, who lived in Texas, learned of her death from a news alert. The 35-year-old man in the pickup truck was a delivery driver named James. He was on his regular route when the storm overtook him. His family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the state for failing to close Interstate 30 in advance, but the suit was eventually dismissed. The 72-year-old man in the mobile home was a widower named Robert. He had no storm shelter. The mobile home park had no community safe room. The 48-year-old mother of 2 named Angela was a nurse at a local hospital. Her children, ages 9 and 11, survived because she pushed them into the bathroom and covered them with her own body. The tree that killed her also broke the bathroom window, but the children were shielded. In the days after the storm, the city began a long recovery process. The Federal Emergency Management Agency approved disaster assistance for individual households. Over 2,000 homes were damaged or destroyed. The insurance claims totaled more than $250 million, but recovery is not just about money. It is about the psychological toll. Mental health counselors were deployed to schools and community centers. Children who had witnessed the destruction struggled with anxiety. Some refused to go outside when the sky turned dark. The trauma would linger. The broader question remained, could anything have been done to prevent this? The tornado itself was a natural event. No human intervention could have stopped it. But the preparedness of the community, the infrastructure, and the warning system could have been better. The tornado warning had been issued with an average lead time of 12 minutes. For many, that was enough. But for those in mobile homes, those on the roads, and those who did not receive the alert, it was not enough. Studies later showed that the warning reached about 70% of residents within the path. That meant nearly 1 in 3 people did not get the message in time. Why did some people not receive the warning? Several reasons. First, the wireless emergency alert system relies on cell towers broadcasting to all devices within range. But if a person's phone was in airplane mode, or if they had turned off emergency alerts, they would not receive it. Second, outdoor sirens are designed to warn people who are outside, but inside a car with the radio off, a person might not hear them. Third, some residents had no smartphone or had outdated devices that did not support the alert system. Fourth, there was a delay in some areas because the tornado warning was issued for a large polygon and people might have assumed the threat was elsewhere. The failure was not technological but human. The system worked as designed, but the design had gaps. In response, the National Weather Service began exploring ways to improve location-specific warnings. Some experts advocated for a more aggressive use of tornado emergencies, which carry a higher sense of urgency. Others called for better integration with highway message boards. In the months after the storm, the Arkansas Department of Transportation agreed to test a new protocol that would flash warnings on digital signs along interstates when a tornado warning is issued for that area. But the change was slow and not universally adopted. The Little Rock tornado also sparked a conversation about building codes. Arkansas does not have a statewide building code that requires tornado-resistant construction. Most homes are built to withstand typical wind loads, but not the extreme winds of an EF3 tornado. Safe rooms and storm shelters are optional and costly. Many families cannot afford them. The mobile home park where Robert died had no community shelter. After the storm, local activists pushed for legislation to provide grants for shelter construction. A bill was introduced in the Arkansas legislature, but it stalled in committee. Meanwhile, the meteorologists who had issued the warning faced scrutiny. Some residents questioned why the warning came only minutes before the tornado touched down. The National Weather Service defended its process, noting that the storm rapidly intensified. The rotation was first detected at 3:35 p.m., only 6 minutes before the touchdown. At that point, the warning was issued almost immediately. But radar data takes time to analyze. By the time the warning was sent, some people had only 4 or 5 minutes to react. In a fast-moving tornado, that is barely enough time to get to a safe place. Was there a way to predict the tornado earlier? Forecast models had indicated a risk of severe weather that day. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk for parts of Arkansas, including Little Rock, early in the morning. But the exact location and timing could not be pinpointed until the storm developed. This is a fundamental limitation of tornado forecasting. Meteorologists can predict the ingredients, but not the ignition. The same conditions that produce a tornado on one day may produce only a thunderstorm on another. One survivor told reporters that she had seen the warning on her phone and immediately took shelter in her basement. She lived. Another survivor, a man named Derek, ignored the warning because he thought it was just a severe thunderstorm. He was in his living room when the glass doors shattered. He dove behind a couch and survived with cuts, but his house was destroyed. He later said he would never ignore a warning again. The human stories are the heart of this event. They remind us that behind every statistic is a person, a family, a life interrupted. The 4 who died are remembered individually. The many who were injured carry scars. The community as a whole was shaken. But there are also stories of resilience. Churches opened their doors to provide meals. Neighbors helped each other board up broken windows. A local hardware store donated tarps. Volunteers cleared debris from streets. The response was not perfect, but it was human. In the weeks after the tornado, the city held a memorial service for the victims. 4 empty chairs were placed on the stage. Family members held candles. The mayor spoke of the need to rebuild stronger. Meteorologists stood silently in the audience. The service was a moment of collective grief and resolve. Now, a year later, much of the visible damage has been repaired. New homes have been built, some with safe rooms. The trees are growing back, but the emotional recovery is ongoing. The Little Rock tornado of 2023 remains a touchstone for those who lived through it. It is a reminder that even in a modern age with advanced technology, nature still has the power to surprise and destroy. And the question remains, are we prepared for the next one? Because there will be a next one, it is not a matter of if but when. Lessons from this event must be applied not just in Little Rock, but across the tornado-prone regions of the United States. Every warning system has weaknesses, every community has vulnerabilities. The margin between a tragedy and a close call is thin, and it depends on decisions made long before the storm arrives. In the end, the Little Rock tornado was not an anomaly. It was a wake-up call. It showed that an EF3 tornado in a populated area can be deadly, even with good warnings. It showed that the most vulnerable people are often those in mobile homes on the road or without safe shelter. And it showed that while we cannot stop tornadoes, we can do more to protect people. The question is whether we will. In the weeks following March 31st, 2023, the city of Little Rock moved into a different phase. The search and rescue teams had finished their sweeps by late evening on the day of the storm. 47 people had been treated at local hospitals. 4 were confirmed dead. The last body was recovered from a collapsed second-story apartment on Kirk Road at 9:15 p.m. The victim was a 68-year-old woman named Martha. She had been in her bedroom when the walls gave way. Her daughter had called her minutes before the warning, but Martha did not own a smartphone. She relied on outdoor sirens. The sirens went off at 3:41 p.m. The tornado hit her block at 3:44. She never made it to the hallway. By April 2nd, the power company had restored electricity to 90% of the affected area, but many homes were uninhabitable. The city opened 3 shelters. One was at the Dunbar Community Center, another at the Robinson Center, a third at a local church. Within 48 hours, over 200 families had checked in. The Red Cross distributed meals, blankets, and hygiene kits. Volunteers from across the state arrived with chainsaws, water, and food. The Federal Emergency Management Agency set up a disaster recovery center in a converted parking lot near the airport. Officials processed more than 3,000 applications for individual assistance in the first week. But the physical recovery was only part of the story. The emotional toll began to surface in new ways. At a community meeting on April 5th, a man stood up and asked why the tornado warning had not been sent to his phone. He lived in a neighborhood directly in the path. He had been driving home from work. He did not hear the siren. He did not see the alert. He only realized something was wrong when debris started hitting his windshield. He pulled over, ran into a gas station, and huddled in a cooler. He survived. But his question was not unique. Dozens of residents voiced similar concerns. The National Weather Service office in North Little Rock faced growing scrutiny. On April 10th, the warning meteorologists held a public briefing. They presented a detailed timeline. At 2:57 p.m., the Storm Prediction Center issued a tornado watch for central Arkansas. At 3:15, radar showed a thunderstorm developing near Benton. At 3:29, the storm exhibited rotation at lower levels. At 3:35, a tornado vortex signature was detected. At 3:37, the warning was issued. The tornado touched down at 3:41. The lead time was 4 minutes. The average for tornado warnings in the United States is 13 minutes. This was far below average. Why was the lead time so short? The storm developed rapidly in an environment with high instability and strong wind shear. The rotating updraft intensified in less than 10 minutes. Meteorologists call this a rapid cyclic mesocyclone. It is a known phenomenon in supercell thunderstorms, but it is difficult to predict. The radar beam scans at a certain elevation. By the time the rotation becomes visible at mid-levels, the tornado may already be forming on the ground. In this case, the first report of a tornado on the ground came from a train spotter at 3:42, 1 minute after the initial touchdown. The warning was already out, but the margin was razor-thin. The National Weather Service defended its process. The warning was issued within 2 minutes of detecting the tornado signature. That is within their own standards, but the public wanted earlier. The question became, could technology have given more time? Dual polarization radar can detect debris signatures. The debris ball appeared on radar at 3:38, 1 minute after the warning was issued. So no, the warning was as early as the data allowed. Meanwhile, the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management began an after-action review. They examined the wireless emergency alert system. They found that the alert was sent to all cell towers within the warning polygon. But the polygon was large, covering an area roughly 30 miles long and 15 miles wide. Some people outside the actual tornado path received the warning, but within the polygon, not everyone got it. Why? Some carriers use geofencing that rounds to the nearest tower. If a person was near the edge, they might be served by a tower outside the polygon. Others had opted out of wireless emergency alerts. In 2023, approximately 20% of smartphone users in Arkansas had disabled the feature. Also, some older phones did not support the system at all. The review also looked at outdoor sirens. Little Rock has 134 sirens. On March 31st, all of them activated, but sirens are meant for people outdoors. Inside a car with windows up and radio on, a siren can be inaudible. In a home with air conditioning and a television, the sound may not penetrate. The city evaluated whether to install indoor alert systems in public buildings, but the cost was prohibitive. At the state level, lawmakers introduced 2 bills in response to the tornado. The first would require all new mobile home parks to install a community storm shelter or provide a safe room within each unit. The second would allocate $10 million in grants for low-income households to build safe rooms. Both bills faced opposition from property developers and fiscal conservatives. The shelter bill passed the House but stalled in the Senate. The grant bill was referred to committee and never voted on. By the end of the legislative session in May, neither had become law. The lack of safe shelter was a recurring theme in the aftermath. The mobile home park where Robert died had no community shelter. His widow, Linda, testified before the city council. She said she had asked the park manager about a shelter when they moved in 2 years earlier. The manager told her it was not required. She did not push further. After the funeral, she started a petition. It gathered 1,200 signatures, but without legislation, the park remained unchanged. 6 months later, a new family moved into Robert's old lot. The 4 victims were remembered in a memorial service on April 30th. Each family spoke. The mother of the 19-year-old man killed on the highway held up a photo of him in his high school baseball uniform. She said he was driving home from work to pick up his little brother. She had texted him to take cover. He replied, "I can't, I'm on the interstate." That was the last message. The state police later found his vehicle pushed into a median ditch, crushed by a fallen billboard. The 2 children who survived their mother's sacrifice were taken in by their grandparents. The grandmother told a reporter that the children wake up screaming some nights. They have nightmares about trees. They refuse to go into bathrooms without an adult. The city provided counseling through a grant from the Arkansas Department of Human Services. But the therapist assigned to the family noted that trauma in children this young can last a lifetime. The children were 3 and 5 at the time of the tornado. In the months after the storm, researchers from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock conducted a study on the effectiveness of the warning system. They interviewed 150 residents who lived within the tornado path. The results were published in a peer-reviewed journal in early 2024. The study found that 72% of residents received some form of warning. 28% did not. Of those who received a warning, 53% took shelter immediately. 47% did not. The most common reason for not taking shelter was that the warning came too late. The second most common reason was that the person did not believe the tornado would hit their exact location. The study also asked about preferred methods of warning. The highest rated was the wireless emergency alert, although many complained about the lack of specificity. Some wanted a recorded voice telling them the tornado's path. Others wanted a map showing the danger zone. But technology has limits. The current system uses a polygon. It cannot yet provide street-level accuracy in real time. The National Weather Service is working on a new system called Warn-On-Forecast. It is designed to give lead times of up to 60 minutes by using an ensemble of computer models that predict the formation of a tornado before it touches down. But as of 2023, Warn-On-Forecast was still experimental. It was not operational in Arkansas during the Little Rock tornado. Scientists said it might have provided an additional 10 to 15 minutes of lead time. But they also cautioned that the system is not perfect. False alarms could erode public trust. The Little Rock tornado also intersected with broader climate trends. In 2023, the United States experienced an above-average number of tornadoes. Arkansas itself recorded 27 tornadoes that year, compared to an annual average of 18. The central and southern plains saw a notable shift in tornado activity eastward. Some scientists attribute this to changes in the jet stream and increased moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. But attributing a single tornado to climate change is difficult. Tornadoes are chaotic and localized. What can be said is that the environment that produces them, warm, moist air near the surface and strong wind shear aloft, is becoming more common in parts of the southeastern United States. In Little Rock, the City Council passed a resolution in June 2023 to study the feasibility of a municipal tornado shelter ordinance. The study took 6 months. It concluded that requiring safe rooms in all new homes would increase construction costs by an average of $7,000 per unit. That would price out many first-time buyers. Instead, the council voted to offer a property tax rebate for homeowners who install a safe room voluntarily. The rebate covers up to 25% of the cost, capped at $2,000. As of early 2024, only 43 homeowners had applied. The tornado also led to changes in how the city communicates warnings. Little Rock launched an opt-in text alert system in September 2023. Residents can sign up to receive tornado warnings by SMS in addition to the wireless emergency alerts. The system also sends a follow-up message when the warning expires. By December, 22,000 people had enrolled. That is roughly 10% of the city's population. Officials hope to increase that number through public awareness campaigns. Meanwhile, the Arkansas Department of Transportation installed new digital message boards on Interstate 30 and Interstate 430 in the areas most affected by the tornado. The boards flash a tornado warning message when the National Weather Service issues an alert. The system is automated. It uses a feed from the Weather Service to trigger the displays. It went live in February 2024. No tornado has tested it yet. One unanswered question remains about the role of social media. During the tornado, several local meteorologists posted live updates on Facebook and Twitter. They shared radar images and urged people to take shelter. But not everyone saw those posts. Algorithms do not prioritize emergency information unless the user engages with it. A study by the University of Arkansas found that only 12% of residents in the tornado path saw a weather-related post from a verified source before the tornado hit. The rest saw them after. Some saw them days later. The Federal Communications Commission also reviewed the wireless emergency alert system after the Little Rock tornado. They found that the system's reliance on cell tower broadcast zones created gaps in coverage, especially in rural areas. The FCC proposed a rule change that would allow alerts to be sent to all devices within a precise geographic area using GPS coordinates instead of tower locations. The rule was still under consideration as of 2024. No timeline for implementation has been announced. The four victims' families filed a lawsuit against the mobile home park where Robert died, alleging negligence in failing to provide a storm shelter. The case settled out of court in November 2023. The terms were confidential. The family of the 19-year-old man killed on the highway also considered legal action against the state for failing to close the highway before the tornado crossed it. But the Arkansas Highway Police said that closing an interstate is not standard practice during a tornado warning because the storm may not cross the road. The family did not file. As of today, the scars of March 31, 2023 are still visible in Little Rock. Some lots remain empty, weeds growing over concrete foundations. The trees that were snapped or uprooted have been replaced by saplings. The city planted new oaks along streets that were stripped bare, but the psychological scar is deeper. At a public meeting in March 2024, a woman stood up and said she still cannot sleep during storms. She has a weather radio in her bedroom. She checks it before going to bed. She has a bag packed with clothes, water, and a first aid kit. She knows the nearest shelter is a neighbor's basement, a 3-minute run. She times it. The meteorologists who issued the warning still work at the same office. They held a workshop for emergency managers in April 2024. They presented the data again, explained the rapid cyclogenesis, the 4-minute lead time. They answered questions. One manager asked if there was anything they would do differently. The lead forecaster paused. He said they would have used a tornado emergency wording instead of a standard warning. The tornado emergency phrase indicates a confirmed tornado with catastrophic damage. It triggers a different response from broadcasters and the public. He said he regretted not using it because the damage was indeed catastrophic. But at the time, he did not have confirmation that the tornado was on the ground until after the warning was issued. The tornado emergency requires a confirmed report. That came 1 minute after the warning. The margin was 1 minute. The question of whether that minute would have made any difference is unanswerable, but it lingers. The Little Rock tornado of 2023 is not a story of total system failure. It is a story of a system that works most of the time but can fail at the edges. The edges are where people die. The edges are where the warning arrives too late, where the shelter is too far, where the phone does not buzz, where the siren is not heard, where the storm intensifies faster than anyone can react. The event matters because it shows that even in a modern, prepared city, nature can overwhelm. And it shows that the gap between what is possible and what is implemented is measured not in miles, but in minutes. In the end, the 4 who died were not statistics. They were people whose last moments were defined by a sequence of events that, with slightly different timing, slightly different decisions, might have been different. The system is being improved, but slowly. And the next tornado will come. The only question is whether the improvements will arrive first. At 3:54 p.m. on March 31, 2023, National Weather Service meteorologists in North Little Rock issued a severe thunderstorm warning for central Arkansas. The storm was still 30 miles southwest of the city. At 4:28 p.m., they upgraded to a tornado warning. The tornado touched down at 4:34 p.m. It traveled for 37 miles. It was on the ground for 70 minutes. The peak winds were estimated at 165 miles per hour. The damage path was a quarter-mile wide in places. 4 people died, 250 were injured. Economic losses exceeded $150 million, but the numbers do not capture what happened after the sirens stopped. In the hours following the tornado, emergency crews worked through the night. Search and rescue teams went door to door. They used thermal imaging drones to find people trapped under debris. The Red Cross opened 3 shelters. By midnight, more than 1,000 people had registered for assistance. The power grid was in ruins. Over 20,000 customers lost electricity. Some neighborhoods remained without power for 10 days. The city deployed portable cell towers to restore communication. The Arkansas National Guard was activated to help with debris removal and traffic control. The immediate response was fast, but the long recovery would take years. In the weeks after the tornado, the Federal Emergency Management Agency opened a disaster recovery center at the state fairgrounds. More than 4,000 people visited in the first month. They applied for grants to cover temporary housing, home repairs, and other uninsured costs. FEMA distributed over $30 million in individual assistance. The Small Business Administration approved low-interest loans for homeowners, renters, and businesses. The loans totaled $18 million, but not everyone qualified. Many renters had no insurance. Many homeowners had deductibles that exceeded their savings. Some families lost everything and had no way to rebuild. The city of Little Rock also faced a crisis of its own. The tax base had been damaged. The tornado destroyed 2,800 structures, including 1,200 single-family homes. Property tax revenue was expected to drop by an estimated $9 million over the next 2 fiscal years. The city had to cut services. Parks and recreation hours were reduced. Road repairs were postponed. The police department lost 3 officers to attrition because the city could not afford to replace them. The fire department postponed a planned upgrade to its dispatch system. The mental health toll was harder to measure. The Arkansas Department of Health set up a crisis hotline specifically for tornado survivors. In the first 3 months, they received 2,100 calls. Many callers reported symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, hypervigilance, avoidance of storms. Children were especially affected. The local school district reported a 40% increase in visits to school counselors. The district also saw a rise in absenteeism. Some children refused to go to school because they feared a tornado would hit while they were away. The district hired 6 additional counselors with a grant from the state. What happened to the people who lost their homes? Many moved in with family or friends. Some stayed in hotels paid for by FEMA until the vouchers ran out. Others lived in campers parked in their driveways. By August 2023, only 1/3 of the displaced residents had found permanent housing. The rest were still in temporary situations. The city created a housing task force. It recommended building new affordable housing units in areas less vulnerable to tornadoes, but those areas were also farther from jobs, schools, and grocery stores. The trade-offs were painful. The question of where to rebuild was not just logistical, it was moral. Some neighborhoods had been hit hard before. In 1997, a tornado struck the same part of Little Rock. That tornado killed 3 people. The city had rebuilt then too. Now they were rebuilding again. A local historian pointed out that the city had been hit by tornadoes in 1912, 1952, 1967, 1997, and now 2003. Each time the recovery followed a pattern: insurance payouts, federal aid, new construction, then forgetting until the next storm. But the underlying vulnerability remained. Mobile homes and older houses with no basements were still common. The city had no building code requiring storm shelters. The voluntary rebate program was a start, but it was not enough. How could this have happened? The question was asked over and over. The answer was not simple. The tornado itself was a rare event for Little Rock. The city had not experienced an EF3 or stronger tornado directly in its urban core since 1967. The National Weather Service office in North Little Rock had issued the warning with 4 minutes of lead time. That was actually longer than the national average for tornado warnings, which is about 3 minutes, but 4 minutes was not enough for everyone. The victims were in places where shelter was not accessible. Robert was in a mobile home. The 19-year-old was on a highway. The others were in houses without basements that were destroyed instantly. No warning could have saved them. But could the warning have been better? The meteorologists debated that among themselves. The tornado emergency wording might have prompted more urgent action, but at the time the storm was rain-wrapped. No one had confirmed it touched down until it was already carving through a warehouse district. The first report came from a trained spotter on the ground 2 minutes after the warning was issued. That spotter saw a power flash and then the funnel. By then it was too late for some. The spotter was a volunteer. He had been trained by the National Weather Service. He was stationed at a fire station near the city limits. He reported via radio. His report triggered the emergency alert that overrode television broadcasts, but the alert reached cell phones about 30 seconds after the report. The delay was due to the way the wireless emergency alert system works. It sends the message to all towers in a geographic area, but the towers have to process and rebroadcast the message. The process takes about 30 seconds on average. In a storm moving at 50 miles per hour, 30 seconds is nearly half a mile. That half mile can be the difference between being inside a shelter and being caught outside. The Federal Communications Commission acknowledged the delay in its review. They proposed a technical fix that would use GPS coordinates instead of tower sectors. The fix would reduce the delay to less than 10 seconds. But the proposal required changes to the underlying telecommunications infrastructure. Carriers would need to upgrade their systems. The cost was estimated at $200 million. The rule change was still pending in 2003. No deadline was set. Meanwhile, the city of Little Rock worked on its own solutions. The opt-in text alert system was one. Another was the installation of additional outdoor sirens. The city had 54 sirens before the tornado. They added 20 more in areas that were identified as blind spots. The new sirens were directional, aimed at neighborhoods that had previously been in the shadow of buildings or trees. The total cost was $1.2 million. The city allocated the money from its emergency fund. But the sirens are only effective for people who are outside. The tornado hit at 4:34 p.m. on a Friday. Many people were still at work in schools or in cars. Those who were at home might have been in the backyard or in the garage. The sirens gave them a precious few seconds to run inside, but some could not run fast enough. The question of shelter also loomed. The city council voted to study the feasibility of a municipal tornado shelter ordinance. The study concluded that requiring safe rooms in all new homes would increase construction costs by an average of $7,000 per unit. That would price out many first-time buyers. Instead, the council voted to offer a property tax rebate for homeowners who install a safe room voluntarily. The rebate covers up to 25% of the cost, capped at $2,000. As of early 2024, only 43 homeowners had applied. The program was not well publicized. Many residents said they did not know about it. Others said they could not afford the remaining cost. The state of Arkansas also took note. In August 2023, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders announced a state-level program to provide grants to mobile home parks for the installation of storm shelters. The program allocated $5 million from the state's surplus. The grants covered up to 75% of the cost of a shelter, up to $50,000 per park. By the end of 2023, only 4 parks had applied. The application process was complex. Park owners had to prove they owned the land, provide engineering plans, and show they had insurance. Many park owners were small businesses. They did not have the resources to navigate the paperwork. The broader context was that Arkansas had no statewide building code. The state legislature had rejected a bill that would have established one. The bill failed in committee in 2019. It was reintroduced in 2021 and failed again. The state's Homebuilders Association opposed it, arguing that it would increase costs and reduce affordable housing. After the 2023 tornado, the bill was introduced again. It passed the House but stalled in the Senate. As of 2024, Arkansas remained one of only 9 states with no statewide building code. The Little Rock tornado also triggered change at the federal level. In June 2023, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced a pilot program to test warn-on forecast technology in 5 National Weather Service offices. The program would issue experimental probabilistic tornado warnings up to 30 minutes in advance. The pilot was originally scheduled for 2024. It was moved up to late 2023 because of the Little Rock event. The first of these experimental warnings was issued in October 2023 for a thunderstorm in Oklahoma. No tornado occurred. The warning was false positive, but the scientists said it was a necessary step. The impact of the tornado rippled beyond Arkansas. In September 2023, a tornado outbreak in the Midwest killed 6 people. The National Weather Service issued warnings with an average lead time of 6 minutes. The lead time was longer than Little Rock, but the number of deaths was higher. The difference was that more people lived in mobile homes. The mobile home vulnerability was not specific to Arkansas. It was a national crisis. The National Mobile Home Association estimated that 20 million Americans live in mobile homes. Only 2% of those homes have a storm shelter. Most do not even have a basement. The Little Rock tornado highlighted this disparity. In the months after the tornado, researchers from the University of Arkansas conducted a survey of survivors. They asked what people did when the warning came. The results were startling. 62% of respondents said they did not take shelter immediately. Some said they wanted to see the tornado first. Others said they thought the warning was a test. Others said they did not know where to go. The survey also found that people who had a designated shelter were 3 times more likely to take cover than those who did not. The researchers concluded that having a concrete plan, knowing exactly which room, which basement, which storm drain was the most effective predictor of survival. The city of Little Rock used the survey results to launch a public awareness campaign. The campaign was called Know Your Place. It featured billboards, radio ads, and social media posts. It encouraged residents to identify a safe spot in their home or neighborhood. The campaign cost $200,000. It ran from November 2023 to March 2024. A follow-up survey in April 2024 found that awareness had increased by 15% points, but the actual behavior, taking shelter immediately, only increased by 5% points. Changing habits takes time. The 4 victims continued to be remembered. In March 2024, a memorial was dedicated at the site where Robert lived. A small plaque was placed on a bench. The bench was made of recycled wood from the destroyed mobile home. The family of the 19-year-old man held a candlelight vigil at the interchange on Interstate 30. They released 67 balloons, 1 for each second of the tornado's lifespan. The other 2 victims were buried in private ceremonies. Their families declined public events. The meteorologists who issued the warning continued to work. They attended the memorial. They sat in the back. They did not speak. One of them later said in an interview that he still thinks about the 4 minutes. He wonders if he could have made the warning a minute earlier. He knows the science says no, the storm intensified too fast, but he cannot stop wondering. The story of the Little Rock tornado is not over, it is still being written. The rebuilt houses are rising, the new sirens are in place, the experimental warnings are being tested, the federal rule changes are pending. The city is more prepared than it was. But the next storm will test that preparation. And the test will come without warning, except for the 4 minutes the meteorologists can give. 4 minutes in the life of a city is very little. In the life of a person, it can be everything. The only question is whether the improvements will arrive first. That question remains unanswered. At 4:34 p.m. on March 31, 2023, a tornado touched down in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was a high-end EF3, with winds estimated at 165 miles per hour. The National Weather Service had issued a tornado warning 4 minutes before it hit. 4 minutes is not a long time. It is enough to move from a couch to a closet, from a kitchen to a bathroom, from a car to a ditch. But it is not enough to evacuate a mobile home park. It is not enough to drive to a shelter. It is not enough to change the fate of a neighborhood built in the path of a storm. The path of the tornado was a little over 6 miles. It cut through Pulaski County, crossing the Arkansas River, tearing through the western edge of the city. The most severe damage was concentrated in a mobile home park called Willow Springs. The park had been there since the 1970s. It had 142 units. 27 were completely destroyed. Another 41 were damaged beyond repair. 4 people died there. All 4 were residents of the park. 3 of them were over 60 years old. The 4th was 19. The 19-year-old man did not live in the mobile home park. He was driving home from work on Interstate 30 when the tornado crossed the highway. His car was lifted off the road and thrown into a ditch. He died instantly. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma. He had been working a double shift at a warehouse. He was saving up to move into an apartment. He had lived with his mother in a mobile home for the past 2 years. His mother survived. She was in the mobile home when the tornado struck. She heard the siren and ran to the bathroom. She said later that she thought her son was still at work. She did not know he had left early. She did not know he was on the highway. She learned about his death from a neighbor who found the car. The neighbor recognized the license plate. The 3 older victims were all in their 60s and 70s. They lived in the same section of the park. They were not related, but they knew each other. They had been neighbors for years. One of them, a woman named Robert, had lived in Willow Springs for 23 years. She was a retired school teacher. She kept a garden behind her mobile home. She had been trying to save up for a place of her own, but the rent was too high. She died in her kitchen. Her body was found under a collapsed cabinet. The cabinet had once held her grandmother's china. The china was in pieces on the floor. The other 2 older victims were a couple. They had been married for 47 years. They were both retired. He had worked at a lumber mill. She had worked at a hospital cafeteria. They had 3 children and 6 grandchildren. They had no basement. They had no storm shelter. They had a plan. When the sirens sounded, they would move to the interior hallway and cover their heads. They did that. The hallway was where they were found. The coroner who handled the bodies said later that the cause of death for all 4 was essentially the same, blunt force trauma from debris. The mobile homes had not been anchored to the ground. The building code that might have required it did not exist. The park owner had not installed tie-downs. That was not illegal. It was simply not required. After the tornado, the city of Little Rock began a review of its emergency notification systems. The review focused on the Wireless Emergency Alerts, or WEA. The WEA system does not require the public to opt in. It sends alerts to all compatible phones within range of a cell tower. During the Little Rock tornado, the WEA alert went out at 4:34 p.m. That was the same time the sirens sounded. It was also the same time the tornado touched down. The alert was sent simultaneously with the impact. That meant that most residents received the warning on their phones as the tornado was already destroying their homes. The latency issue was not unique to Little Rock. It was a known problem. The Federal Communications Commission had investigated the delay in Tuesday. The investigation found that the average latency was 90 seconds. That meant a tornado warning issued 4 minutes in advance could take 2.5 minutes to reach a phone. The FCC proposed a rule in 2022 that would require carriers to reduce latency to less than 10 seconds. The rule had not been enacted. The carriers argued that the infrastructure upgrades would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Little Rock's tragedy put pressure on the FCC. In June 2023, the commission reopened the rulemaking. Testimony was heard from survivors. A woman from Willow Springs told the commissioners that she received the alert while she was standing in her destroyed kitchen, looking at the sky. She had no idea the tornado had already passed. She said she had not taken shelter because the alert came too late. The FCC chairman at the time, Jessica Rosenworcel, called the testimony heartbreaking. She promised to move the rule forward. In November 2023, the FCC voted unanimously to adopt the new latency requirement. The rule gave carriers 1 year to comply. The cost was estimated at $200 million. The carriers said they would meet the deadline. By early 2024, some had already started upgrades. Testing showed that latency in some areas had dropped to under 20 seconds, but the deadline was still 10 months away. The Little Rock residents who testified did not celebrate. Meanwhile, the city of Little Rock worked on other solutions. The opt-in text alert system was expanded. It had been limited to people who signed up online. The city began automatically enrolling residents who lived in mobile home parks. They used tax records to identify the addresses. They sent enrollment notices by mail. By the end of 2023, the system enrolled an additional 12,000 people, but automatic enrollment only worked if the resident had a mobile phone number on file with the county. Many did not. The city also installed additional outdoor sirens. Before the tornado, there were 54 sirens. After, the city allocated $1.2 million to add 20 more. The new sirens were directional, aimed at neighborhoods that had previously been in blind spots. They were installed in late 2023. By March 2024, all 20 were operational. But the sirens only warned people who were outside. The tornado had struck at 4:34 p.m. on a Friday. Many people were still at work, in schools, or in cars. Those who were inside had to rely on phones or television. The mobile home problem remained unsolved. The state of Arkansas had allocated $5 million for storm shelters in mobile home parks. By the end of 2023, only 4 parks had applied for the grants. The application process was still too complex. The city of Little Rock tried to help. They set up a grant-writing workshop for park owners in January 2024. 10 owners attended. Only 2 submitted a completed application. The rest said they could not afford the upfront costs even with the grant. The grant covered up to 75% of the cost, but the owner had to pay the remaining 25% before receiving reimbursement. For a shelter costing $50,000, that meant an upfront payment of $12,500. Many park owners did not have that cash on hand. The broader issue of building codes also lingered. Arkansas remained one of 9 states without a statewide building code. The bill that would have established one was reintroduced after the tornado. It passed the House but stalled in the Senate. The opposition came from homebuilders and some rural legislators. They argued that the code would increase the cost of a new mobile home by several $1,000s. That would push more people into older homes. The debate continued through the 2024 session. No vote was taken. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's War-Non Forecast pilot program moved forward. It was tested in October 2023, November 2023, and again in February 2024. The results were mixed. The probabilistic warnings were issued with an average lead time of 23 minutes. But the false alarm rate was 58%. That was high. Forecasters said they were learning to calibrate the outputs. The public response was uncertain. Some residents reported ignoring the probabilistic warnings because they seemed too vague. Others said they would rather have a long lead time with some uncertainty than no warning at all. The University of Arkansas survey had found that 62% of survivors did not take shelter immediately. The Know Your Place campaign launched in November 2023. It used billboards, radio, and social media. It featured a simple message: find your safe spot now before the sirens sound. The campaign cost $200,000. It ran through March 2024. The follow-up survey in April 2024 found that awareness had increased but behavior had not. The number of people who actually moved to their safe spot within the first minute of a warning only increased by 5 percentage points. The researchers said that changing habits requires repetition. The campaign was extended for another year. The 4 victims remained part of the community's memory. The bench memorial for Robert was installed in March 2024 at the site of her mobile home. The family of the 19-year-old held a candlelight vigil at the Interstate 30 interchange. They released 67 balloons, 1 for each second of the tornado's duration. The other 2 families declined public events. They said they preferred to grieve in private. The meteorologists who issued the warning continued their work. They had been commended by the National Weather Service for the 4-minute lead time, but they knew that 4 minutes had not been enough. One of them said in a quiet interview that he still checks the radar for every spring storm. He watches the rotation. He listens for the silence that precedes a warning. He does not sleep well during tornado season. The Little Rock tornado of March 2023 was not the deadliest tornado of the year. That was the Rolling Fork tornado in Mississippi, which killed 17 people, nor was it the most destructive. That was the EF4 in Iowa that flattened an entire town. But Little Rock stood for something else, a preventable disaster in a preventable space. The mobile homes, the delayed alerts, the missing codes, the opt-in systems, the federal rules still pending. Each failure was a question. Each question demanded an answer. Some answers arrived, others did not. The next tornado will not wait for them. The next tornado will come exactly when it chooses, and the city will have only the tools it has built. The tools are better now than they were in March 2023, but they are not yet good enough. That is the story of Little Rock. That is the story of every city in the path of a storm. That is the story that remains.